I went to Holy Cross College and I found that the Grail ran what they called schoolgirl camps. I'd never heard of the Grail, but the other girls at the school told me that they were terrific. They were up in Springwood, and mostly you did bushwalking and dancing and carrying on. And I thought, oh gee, that's for me. So that is how I found the Grail. As I came to get to know the Grail, I thought, oh, this is a very special group, of women. Part of my going to high school had been a bargain with my father that I would work for 3 years, helping. I was the eldest of 5 children, and Mum and Dad didn't want me to join the Grail until I was 20, 21. So I went to the public service, but most of my time was playing tennis, all sorts of sports, dancing all night in lots of places. I loved dancing. And then also from time to time meeting up with, just hooking into Grail activities to see a little bit more about what this group, who they were, who these women were, and could I see myself working with them or being with them or living with them. And so that's what happened. As a young woman, what I had decided that I wanted to do with my life was to work with people in cross-cultural situations. I don't know quite why, but I think as I got to know the Grail more, I realised that that was a possibility, that you could do that sort of thing with your life. And also in those days, I've been in the Grail most of my adult life, so 50 or so years ago, it was possible, I think, because the world was a bit different in the environment. I decided that I would make a life commitment into this group and remain a single woman, but within the community. And that's what I did. So that needed a teaching degree, etc., and that came my way after I became what they used to call, not participants, but you were a member of the Grail, but hadn't made a commitment in the Grail in those. So they offered me that chance, and I took it, and I went to Melbourne University with Alison at the time, and I got an arts degree and a diploma in education. The Grail set up, they were given a very beautiful old Tudor house. So it was a lovely place. And they built some dormitories on the back. And then they started a program for young women who were working girls or students or whatever. In the evening, they had lots of programs of interest to young women growing up in the city in those days. And also a lot of information about the world and trying to expand people's minds and that sort of thing. And it was hugely successful. So I did some training in Springwood, and then I went to Melbourne to be part of that. That was my dream, and it was always my dream. But I could see that, for example, what I had, the gifts I had, were usable in the Melbourne program, so I went to Melbourne. And then a bishop in northern Queensland invited the Grail to staff the women's college that was to be built at James Cook University. And also because I had a degree, little experience at that stage, but Moya Merrick was the principal, and I went with her to establish this college. So I had enough, I had a degree, and I completed my education degree also during that time, but I was sort of part of the place, and I was needed to, do a lot of the practical work. I was young, and to interact with the students and to assist Moya in seeing, what life was going to be like in a college. We were fortunately in a cottage early on, which made it very pleasant. And then Moya was an architect and she helped build the college. And she and another of the Grail women went actually onto the campus in the early 70s. And then I came back here for a while, and then it was decided that the other place that we had in Mackay, which was more or less a residence for younger women coming from the rural areas, that I should run that for a while. And possibly those years I matured, because mostly on my own. And what I did with that place, it was in the 60s when young women were wanting to get out, 70s, I'm sorry, young women were wanting to get out of home, they didn't like living in hostels. So there were about a dozen of them left. So I taught them all to cook and said, if you'd like to leave, that's fine, just go with whatever will make you happy and your parents are okay with. And then I turned it into an adult education centre, and also a centre where lots of groups could come and have our centre as a meeting place. I became president of the social welfare for the city. I also had a wonderful friendship with a woman who was a community development worker. And we set up lots of programs for women. I had a lot of experience, a lot of responsibility. I did work for the churches at that stage. I worked at night because I found the afternoons for myself a bit debilitating, but most people could only meet in the evenings anyway. So I helped the priest set up the parish councils and stuff like that. I was busy, I got a lot of skills. They also asked me to give reflections on television, and I would do that once a week. So I was there from 71, I think, to 77, and I'm most grateful for that because I did add a lot to my skill set and had some real experience that I thought would be valuable. Anyway, by 1980, I was really thinking, oh gosh, it's 20 years since I've joined the Grail and I'm still here and I want to go to, do this other thing. So the international president of the Grail, who was a most beautiful Simone Tara, she was Egyptian. And so she came and visited all the places, and I was still in Mackay at that stage. So I had a big whinge about how here I was, 20 years into my life's journey in the Grail, and I still hadn't, been able to leave the country because I was needed all the time. So she didn't ever say much, but you knew she heard you. And so later in the year, I got a message from her to say that she wanted me to go to Tanzania to their first ever East African Grail meeting. That was Tanzania, Uganda and Kenya. And so I was so excited, and of course people let me go in that sense. So I went. That was a life-changing year for me. The wonderful things about being in the Grail, one of the most wonderful things, is that you stay in the community with the people. You're not an outsider. You are an outsider to a certain extent, but you're living the daily life with the people. And so that lasted for a couple of months, but, I'd got to know what some parts of Tanzania looked like. But then I decided I'd go home to Uganda and Kenya when the women were going home. I went to Uganda first. That was under Idi Amin. And I saw all the wonderful work the Grails were doing in hospitals particularly, They were in partnership with Grail women who were doctors and nurses from Germany in particular, and they built up this wonderful system both in Kampala and in outstations. And then I went to Kenya, where they were more involved in community development work. So I received so much from those months than I was ever able to give. But I decided that I'd go back. I needed to go back. So I taught English as a second language to raise some funds. And then in 81 I went back for 2 years. However, I only stayed one because I was needed at home again in 82. Again, it was a year of immersion. I think one of the best things was they had a Land Rover, the Grail, in a wonderful place called Kisikibaha. And so I didn't speak much Kiswahili, but I did try to learn some. And but they had this Land Rover, and it was quite an essential thing for women, particularly in the villages. We had 2 around us and 1 up the mountain, and especially for taking women to hospital when they were going to give birth, or bringing home bodies when they were to be buried, and to do the shopping, all that sort of stuff. I remember one of the most wonderful incidents for me was I was going out shopping, and so when I got to this river, there were all these people waiting, men, women, children. And I thought, oh, they must give these people a lift. So next thing I knew, all the men were in. The women had all the stuff for market and everything, and the children, and the men were all in, sitting there, waiting me to drive off. So I thought, oh. So I drove them into the market. It was probably just half an hour's drive or something. And I thought the women have to walk an hour and then get on a bus and then get to the market and then do it all backwards. So when I went home, I said to somebody, teach me Swahili for women and children first. So they taught me wanawake, na watoto kwanza. So the next week, I locked all the car with all the buttons, and I got to it, and the men were, and I put my head out the window and I said, wanawake na watoto kwanza, and all the women jumped, clapping and laughing and all that. So I couldn't take them all, of course, but then I gradually lifted the locks in the car, and the women and children, all I could fit. You know, it had seats in the back and all that sort of thing. So from that time on, I was called the wanawake na watoto lady. The Grail is a movement, it is a community, and it is also an organisation. Again, I learnt so much. So I have to say that at the end of those years, I felt very fulfilled, affirmed, and I thought, gosh, what a wonderful decision I made when I was offered that opportunity. And my mother was actually responsible for all that, really, I feel, because not having been educated herself, she saved up money so that I could go and do my last 2 years at school. So whether I would have met the Grail or not, I doubt it, you know. It was all a gift at that stage of my life, which opened up everything, and you know, everything has its ups and downs. But I feel I've had a wonderful life, and I've tried to be an activist also as much as I could, both at home here and elsewhere, especially when I was in the international team. So what more could you ask for, really? A friend used to say to me, think of what your dream was. If you get stuck later on, think of what your dream was when you were 18 or so. That is really what has been somehow in your heart is your true self. And so sometimes we find it quickly, sometimes we don't find it till after we're 40 and the kids have left school or whatever and we've got time, or later in your 40s, and you think, oh, now I can do what I really want to do. But I was lucky that this flow happened in my life and I was able to follow it.